I'm delighted to be joined today by Professor Mathhew Robinson, who will share his journey with us from having ME-CFS, POTS and long COVID, how he ultimately managed to recover by using 60 sessions of medical-grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Mathhew has written a book about his recovery, which is called The Long Haul, My 4-Year Battle to Beat Long COVID, ME-CFS and POTS. And it's a book that I have read and which I thoroughly recommend. He is also a professor of criminal justice at Appalachian State University, has authored 27 books in this area, and is also a published poet. Prior to doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy, he was also a patient at the Bateman Horne ME-CFS clinic, where he was treated with some success. I myself am currently undergoing medical-grade hyperbaric oxygen. I'm 20 sessions in, and so I'm really looking forward in particular to diving into Mathew's experience with hyperbaric oxygen today and to hear his story of how he recovered from these debilitating diseases. Mathhew, a warm welcome to my channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just to set the scene a bit for us, Mathhew, please tell us a bit about your background, where you're from, the kind of work that you do, and then we'll get into your health journey.
Sure. So I was born and raised in the state of Florida. Um, in St. Petersburg, Florida. I was raised by a single mother along with a brother who's very close to my age. So we were a very close-knit family, obviously. I got 3 degrees from Florida State University from the School of Criminology and Criminal Justice. When I received my PhD in 1997, I joined the faculty at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. I've been here ever since. So this is my 28th year, completing my 28th year now here. I have a wonderful career here with support of an amazing university that even through my illnesses, they have given me time off, including time off with pay to pursue medical treatment and things like that. They've made accommodations to allow me to continue to work by putting classes online as needed and things like that. I was and aim to be again an avid hiker, an explorer, world traveler. I've been able to get back to some of that stuff after my recovery began, and I'm enjoying again traveling the world with my wife. We most recently just got back from South Africa when I was invited to go teach at the University of Pretoria in the law school over there. So that's one of the other major benefits of my career is making connections abroad and being invited to speak and things like that. That's me in a nutshell. I'm a dog owner, I'm a parent, and I'm a professor. That's pretty much it.
Thank you very much, Mathhew, for that. So I know you had a range of other quite serious health problems in the past, but you talk in the book about how really ME-CFS, POTS, and long COVID was the worst that you've ever experienced.
Yeah.
So tell us now, when did this all start for you? When did you get that COVID infection that kicked all of this off?
So, COVID had hit the United States reportedly, in the news in early 2020, although now we know it's probably here or certainly here in late 2019. Before COVID was even supposedly on the East Coast of the United States, I went to a concert to celebrate one of my friend's birthdays. There was 6 or 7 of us who went to this concert, and it was a venue that was sort of a vacation venue up here in the mountains of North Carolina. And so we actually met people from Oregon and California at that event. And I mean, I became really close with them and really enjoyed the night with them, including hugs and high fives and things like that as we listened to great music. Shortly thereafter, I felt really sick. I started having the symptoms of what was described in the news as COVID. Real bad cough, congestion, fever, almost like a sinus infection, and difficulty sleeping, sweating at night and things like that. And so I contacted the health department and said, I have these symptoms and they sound like what I'm hearing about in the news as COVID. The local health department says it's not possible for you to have COVID. It's not here, but just in case, isolate and stay away from people for a couple weeks. So that's what I did. I was dreadfully sick for 2 weeks with this illness, like basically bedbound. Then I got better for a couple days, and then it seemingly came back, and I was sick for another couple weeks with it. So I was sick, pretty dreadfully sick for about a month. This is around the time that I had met my wife. We had met online. Well, no, I mean, a joint friend sort of set us up, but we started talking online, and turns out she had what appeared to be COVID too. So we were able to hang out together since we were both sick. But long story short, I got better. And then maybe 3 weeks after that infection, I woke up dizzy. And that was my symptom that it first started. And the dizziness was about every 3 days. And then it became every 2 days. And then it became every day. And then literally it became every moment of my life. This is when I knew something was wrong. At the time, no one was even talking about long COVID. No one knew what long COVID was. I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it at the time. I had no idea that it was that my dizziness was related to my COVID infection or anything like that either. There was no way to know at the time because this is early 2020 on the East Coast of the United States. Again, before it was supposedly even here. But this went on for some time, and then fatigue set in, and then you mentioned post-exertional malaise. Post-exertional malaise came, which greatly impacted my ability to do the things I love to do, like hiking and things like that. Over time, as it went on, brain fog started happening. That was very, very detrimental to me and harmful to me in my career as a professor. Being in the classroom, not being able to remember words, losing my train of thought, not being able to find my way back. So that's how it started in early 2020. And as time went on, it just got worse and worse and worse. And so for the first 2 years of my journey, I was dreadfully sick, bedbound. I would only come to work and teach. Then I would go home and get in bed and not get out of bed again. My girlfriend, who became my fiance, who became my wife, had to do everything. The house, she had to cook, clean, walk the dog, take care of everything. I did what I could, but I couldn't do much. And I didn't know what was wrong with me for the first 2 years. I got faulty diagnosis after faulty diagnosis after faulty diagnosis. I saw doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and just didn't get anywhere in terms of getting well.
Yes, and I mean, so really in that time, the only positive thing was the unlikely setting for romance that occurred.
That's right. That's right.
And apart from that, it was a really, really difficult time. And like for so many people, you know, you just don't know what's happening. You've no idea.
That's right.
The system is not set up to support you. I mean, in your book, you talk about, I think you saw 30 doctors in the first two
Got
years.
20, ultimately 21 or 22 doctors. Yes.
21, 22 doctors. You stayed in several hospitals.
That's right.
You got a range of diagnoses, but you felt that those weren't right, and they didn't sit with you. And I think bit by bit, you started to actually suspect that you were having this long COVID
That's
ME-CFS
right.
kind of kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
So once you suspected that, what was your next step?
Yeah, so it was doctor number six who was a neurologist who first mentioned the term long COVID to me, and that's the first I heard of it. So of course, then I started reading, researching, finding as much information as I could, and there just wasn't much. But what I found, what I recall, is that the things that I was reading online that were available, the very few things, were describing the symptoms that I had. So I was pretty confident. But then when I searched my symptoms, I discovered ME-CFS, myalgic encephalomyelitis chronic fatigue syndrome. I discovered POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And so I pretty much diagnosed myself. I said, this must be what I have. So I started researching those. And that's when I discovered the Bateman Horn Clinic in Salt Lake City, Utah. So I reached out to them, told them what was happening to me. And I asked if I could be a patient. The way that the system worked at the time was you have to pay a fee to become a patient. And so I paid the fee. I traveled to Salt Lake City, Utah. And I mean, immediately after seeing the doctors and undergoing their tests, they said, what you have is ME-CFS and POTS. And I said, okay, now I know what's wrong with me at least. This is a starting point. And they suspected that it was caused by a viral infection. So I told them experience with COVID, and they said, you have long COVID. And the way it manifests in you is ME-CFS and POTS. And so that at least gave me some hope, because with the correct diagnosis, finally, I felt like I could at least try to get somewhere with my health.
Yes, absolutely. And I think actually quite a few people end up getting their official diagnosis in a similar way.
Yeah,
They're taking charge of their own life and their own health. They're not satisfied
yeah,
with the answers they've got. They do their own research, and then they go to someone who's in a position to say yes or no for sure to that. Um, and so you get to the Bateman Horn Clinic, and they do a variety of tests. And this was the start of a turning point for you.
yeah.
Um, so tell us about the kind of tests they did and the treatments.
Yeah, so I underwent several exertion tests, to see what I could do in terms of heart rate and breathing and things like that. But But the tilt test and the lean test, the NASA lean test, if I recall correctly, was what led to my diagnosis because my dizziness skyrocketed, my heart rate skyrocketed, my blood pressure fell, things like that. My legs got numb. I almost passed out. Almost fell down. That's how they knew what was wrong with me. So they put me on a series of medicines, one at a time. First, they started me with salt drinks and constrictive clothing, but they also immediately put me on Midodrine. And the way they describe Midodrine to me, it's a kind of a funny story to me. It's like compression clothing in a pill. It's the way they described it to me. So you take the Midodrine and it restricts blood flow to your limbs so that you get more blood flow to your brain. I noticed an immediate benefit on Midodrine within the first month, I would say. So I track my symptoms on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is symptom free, something I never experienced, and 10, I need to be in the hospital. So, anything above 2, frankly, was kind of uncomfortable. 4 or 5, I'm in bed. 7 or 8, I want to die. It's that bad. I know that your viewers and listeners understand this very well, particularly those with ME-CFS. It's just the most awful thing to feel and experience, I think, of any illness on the planet. And I think that's studies confirm that. So when I say that I saw a 5% improvement per month, what that means is that on that 0 to 10 symptom scale, my symptoms were improving 5% literally on that symptom scale month per month. It was a very slow process. It was a very frustrating process, but it was steady. And I started to think, okay, this has worked, but I wanted more. So I reached out to them again and saw them again, and they put me on two new pills. Both of them are off-label type medications that are prescribed for other things, but have been found in research to be helpful long-term for people with ME-CFS and POTS. So they started me on low-dose Abilify, and then about a week or so later, I started on low-dose Naltrexone. So it's hard to say. It's hard to say which of those drugs helped me independently or if they worked together because I took them around the same time. But I started to see about an 8% improvement, 8 to 10% improvement per month. So this was my life for the next 2 years. So the first 2 years, dreadfully sick, no hope, faulty diagnosis, no medication, no therapy. Everything I tried didn't work. Everything that was prescribed for me by doctors didn't work, physical therapy and all that kind of stuff didn't work. And then I started to see this improvement on these medicines of Bateman Horne. And my doctor at Bateman Horne, Dr. Bateman, said, you're going to get all the way better. I believe you're going to get all the way better. And she said, preliminary evidence suggests that people with long COVID tend to recover better with ME-CFS than traditional ME-CFS patients. And so I believed her. And sure enough, after 2 years on my symptom scale, I was 80% better. So I'd gone from a level 10 to a level 2. That's what I mean by 80% better. And again, level 2 is uncomfortable, but I was functional. I was thankful for the improvements in my health. Then I had a relapse and she warned me. She said, don't get overconfident. This could happen anytime. And the relapse put me back up to a level 5 or 6. I was bedbound for a solid month, almost 2 months. And at that point, I lost hope because I realized that from my perspective, Bateman Horne wasn't curing my illness. It was treating my symptoms. It was treating my symptoms effectively. I was very grateful and thankful for that. But I knew that I needed something else to try to address the root cause of the illness to the degree that someone could. That's when I started researching more, and I got a letter in the mail from my mother with a newspaper article from a local paper in Central Florida. The Aviv Clinics is in Villages, Florida, which is near Orlando, Florida. And it was an article about Aviv, this clinic, that was starting to treat people with long COVID with hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And my mom just said, you need to look into this. So that's what I did. I started looking into it, and that's how I discovered Aviv, which would be ultimately my next stop.
I'm just interrupting this interview for a second to tell you about my new book, Understanding ME-CFS and Strategies for Healing. In it, I break down some of the latest, most exciting ME-CFS research which can really demystify the illness, as well as talking about various treatment strategies that I have used in order to improve my own quality of life as an ME-CFS patient. The links for the book are in the description box. See, so really, you had this 2 year period, which must have given you a cause for hope. You were moving
Yeah.
in the right direction. But then ultimately, as is so often the case with ME, I can think of cases that have happened to me where, I've built up to, let's say, a half an hour walk. I'm managing well, and then I've suddenly become bedridden for 2 months.
Yeah.
And so, there's this kind of it can just come and take you very quickly.
Yeah.
So you've been building up, you had that hope, and then you had this relapse. At that point, were you feeling that this trio of medications, they were helping, but they weren't really healing? Is that fair to say?
That's correct. That's a good way to describe it. They were helping me, but I didn't feel like they were healing me. That I didn't think I was going to get all the way better.
I see. Yes. Okay. So at this point, you come across hyperbaric oxygen therapy. You come
Mhm.
across the Aviv Clinics in Florida, which is one of the best clinics, I believe, for HBOT in the USA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and you're thinking about doing that treatment, but it's not an easy decision. I mean, this is a 3-month protocol. You're going to have to go away from your family. You're going to have to live separately. It's a big investment. You must have had a lot of worries about it. I mean, what were you thinking, and what ultimately made you say, yes, I'm going to give this a go?
So it was actually quite terrifying. First of all, the financial investment was huge. Tens of thousands of dollars. Insurance doesn't cover it. It's experimental treatment at this point. It's not FDA approved. I know that Aviv wants to get FDA approved, and that requires multiple studies from multiple sites running at the same time for years. It includes and it requires millions of dollars of investments. I had to make a decision about taking a chance with this place based on, at the time, very limited evidence of its efficacy or effectiveness for long COVID. At the time, the only published study at the time was for their patients 3 weeks later. So they had long COVID patients who had seen improvements, and then those symptoms were maintained for 3 weeks. But that's not exactly convincing, clear of efficacy. But it was enough for me to really have serious discussions with my wife about investing this type of money, with my mother, because my mother lives down in that area. So I asked if I could live with her for that 3-month period. And so it was a group decision. We all decided I should try it, that I had tried everything else. I had seen more than 20 doctors in 4 states. I'd been in 3 hospitals. I had tried all kinds of medications. I was really thinking that this is my last hope to get better. I had seriously contemplated suicide, and I was never suicidal. I never wanted to die. I don't want to die. I love my life, but I was so sick. I just wanted it to be over. So sometimes at night, many times for 2 years, I kind of hoped I didn't wake up the next day. I hoped I died in my sleep, and kind of expected that to happen. So that was really strong motivation for me to give Aviva a shot. So I contacted them. I talked with them extensively on the phone, and then I scheduled an assessment to go down there. They do a very extensive testing session, both cognitively and physically, to make sure you're capable of undergoing the treatment. And then I was accepted as a patient.
I see. I mean, what you're speaking to there, Mathhew, is when you have this illness, it's you get to the point where you would do anything not to suffer.
Yeah.
I think in my own case, traveling alone now to Romania to do hyperbaric oxygen as well, th this is the kind of thing that it's scary to take on, but I'm prepared to do it because I can't accept things have to change. So I think
Yeah.
what you say there, really would speak to a lot of people about that moment where you just decide, I've got to go for something. So you get to the Aviv clinics. Now, before we talk about their testing before the treatment,
Yeah.
for people who are not familiar with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and of course we're talking about medical grade hyperbaric oxygen therapy, the real deal, not just the stuff you get in wellness clinics and spas. This is much more powerful. Can you tell us a bit about how it works, and what is it doing in the body?
Yeah, so the theory that was presented to me by Aviv is this. So it's based on a Nobel Prize discovery in medicine about a hormone that's produced when you're in hyperbaric oxygen, in terms of being on and off oxygen. The way the Aviv clinic works, I think this is what separates it from most other clinics that practice, at least the ones that I know about. You're in a chamber for 2 hours. you're in a chamber at Aviv with up to 14 people, each in their own very comfortable chairs. Everyone has their own tablet in front of them. That's for the brain training exercises that you do while you're in there. But the theory that was presented to me is you're on 100% pure oxygen for 20 to 30 minutes, depending upon the session. And then you get a 5-minute oxygen break. And when you're on the oxygen break, you're breathing regular atmosphere, which is 21% oxygen. Then you're back on the 100% oxygen with the mask, and then you're off. You're back on it, and you're off. So the oxygen breaks are 5 minutes, and the on oxygen sessions are between 20 and 30 minutes. This goes on for 2 hours. The theory that was presented to me is when you're off the oxygen and you're breathing atmosphere, your body enters a hypoxic state. It's not dangerous. You're just breathing regular oxygen. You're just breathing regular atmosphere. But your body, being used to that 100% oxygen, enters a hypoxic state. They call this the hyperoxic-hypoxic paradox. That is, you're in a hypoxic state, but it's not dangerous. But in those moments when you're off the oxygen is when your body starts generating stem cells. Those stem cells then do the repair work. They find damage in your brain, in your body, and do the repair work. So the way that it was described to me by Aviv is that we trick your body into healing itself. So the treatment is primarily the oxygen therapy, on and off oxygen. For about an hour of the 2 hours, a little bit less, you're doing brain training exercises. So you're using your brain, practicing exercises that are prescribed for you based on what you need. And they're sort of fun brain training games of all different kinds, shapes, colors, words, sounds, all kinds of things, moving things around, identifying where things on the screen when they disappear, things like that. And so you're using your brain, and that's the theories that helps the oxygen process in your body and your brain. And there's an exercise component, and this is prescribed to each person based on what they can do. So for me, I was pretty functional when I started, so I could do most of what they asked me to do. Other patients in my group, including long COVID patients, were literally had to do only things exercise-wise on their back. They really couldn't do much, and oftentimes they couldn't do anything. But the theory that they presented to me was that the way the stem cells get to your brain is by increasing your heart rate through exercise. So exercise was prescribed for me 4 times a week, 20 minutes a day. My heart rate to a certain zone, and that zone for me was 128 to 138 minutes, what they call zone 3. I had to do that 4 times a week, 20 times a day to get the stem cells to my brain. So the theory is that the stem cells then repair the damage that you can see in your brain through the SPECT scans that they do prior to your treatment.
I see. Very interesting. And this is actually quite funny in your book when you're talking about this exercise component that you're suddenly presented with, because I believe the conditioning coach said to you that he wanted you to jog.
That's right.
Yeah. Now,
And
that was,
I said, you're crazy. I can't do that.
yeah.
And he said, that was John. He said, this is how you're going to get better. And so he said, I want you to frame it as part of your treatment. It's part of your treatment. And so once I did that, it made it acceptable to me, not bearable, but acceptable to me to try to start jogging. And, I'm sure anyone can identify with this. Anyone who hasn't jogged in 5 or 10 years, however long it was, who's asked to jog, it is brutal. It is agonizing when you start. But I just kept doing it because they told me this is part of my treatment. So that's how I accepted it.
So did
And
you
they said,
sorry to interrupt, but did you get PEM from that jogging?
thankfully I did not, which was very surprising to me because I had cut back on most exercises. I had cut back on like real extensive hiking or heavy, difficult hiking. I could still walk my dog. I could still do some moderate hikes or easy hikes with my wife. But the stuff we were doing before I got sick, or that I was doing before I got sick, was just not possible anymore for me. So I was very surprised that I did not experience PEM as a result of the jogs. But these were very, very slow jogs. I'm talking about like 14-minute miles, which is only a little bit faster than I walk.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I got it. Okay. So a little bit faster
Yeah,
than you walk these
yeah.
jogs. And I mean, do you think that the fact that you were doing the treatment protected you from the PEM to an extent that might have otherwise happened?
I think that's a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure, of course. But I think that's a reasonable conclusion that the treatment offers additional benefits that maybe they don't even tell you about, such as that.
I see. And was your impression from the Aviv staff, the Aviv Clinic team, that it really is the hyperoxic hypoxic paradox that is the healing active ingredient of this therapy? Because I believe that that's quite recent research, and that previously people just used to think it was because so much oxygen was getting in everywhere. So is it
Yeah,
now more the case that it's really the HIF and the hypoxic reaction that is the key to success?
I believe that's true. That's what was told to me, and that's what I came to accept. Yes.
Okay, very interesting. So that kind of speaks, I suppose, also to how it's going to take time. Each treatment is like a stimulus towards healing, and the
Yeah.
body has to work on repairing itself. So this is not something where you go in and do a week and then you're feeling great. This is a slow and
Yeah.
steady, and you have to stick at it. This is quite a commitment, as you know, for
And
3 months.
yeah, and importantly, it's very important to point out that I was told from the beginning, don't expect to get better right away. This takes time. And they said some people don't get better for months after their treatment. Some people it could take up to a year. I was very fortunate. I started seeing improvements in the first 2 weeks on my symptom scale. I saw steady, consistent improvements with a couple lulls during the 3 month period. But by the end of the treatment, I was literally I had a symptom free moment first, and then I had like a symptom free couple hours, and it was like I had tried to imagine what that would be like. I couldn't even imagine. I'd said to my wife and my mom and my brother so many times, I don't even remember what it's like to feel normal, to feel well. And I started having symptom-free moments and then symptom-free hours, and then I had a symptom-free day, and then I had a symptom-free week. And by the end of my treatment, I was completely symptom-free for 2 straight weeks. And I couldn't believe it because they told me not to expect it to happen so fast. But for me, it did. For others in my dive group, there were 14 of us when we started, all at different times, and people graduate, come out, graduate from the program at different times. But other long COVID patients in my group didn't see the type of dramatic improvements I saw. They did ultimately get better, but for one of them, it took 6 months for her to get all the way better. But she did, in fact, get better.
So those other patients, they actually did. It wasn't just a question of ultimately quality of life, but they actually did recover as well.
At least one of them did. Now, I haven't stayed in touch with all of them since we departed because they live abroad. Um, One lives in the UK and several live in the Netherlands. But two patients from the Netherlands got 100% better. And the other patients that, as far as I know, saw improvements, but I can't speak to how well they recovered long term.
I see. So which week was it into the 12-week process where you said to yourself, wow, my life's going to be different forevermore now? When did that moment really happen where you were certain that something good was happening for you?
Well, I was certain. I was certain throughout. I would say by week 3, I was pretty confident that this was having very good benefits for me. But I would say the first day of week 11, so the second to last week, I knew that I was getting better, that I was recovering. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. So that must have been a wonderful moment. I mean, as you say, like me being 7 years ill, we do forget what it is like to be normal.
Yeah.
And we
Mhm.
just sort of take, like when we have a half good day, we're like, oh, that's wonderful. God, that's great. Want to hold on to that. But that's nothing in comparison to what normal truly feels like. And we just forget that.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us about the tests you did before and what results you saw when you went back to do the tests after your program had finished. So what were the objective things that actually the team was able
Sure.
to say had improved for you?
So first, you undergo the test before you start treatment. When you finish treatment 3 months later, you return to the clinic 3 weeks after that, and you undergo the same tests, and then you return 6 months later and undergo the same tests. The reason they do that is they want to show you your starting point, and then they want to show you how things have changed post treatment immediately after, in 3 weeks after, and then 6 months down the road. So there's the physical testing, the blood testing. The exertion tests on a treadmill to establish things like VO2 max and maximum heart rate and all that kind of stuff, blood pressure and things like that. And then there's very, very extensive cognitive testing, paper and pencil testing, computer testing, and tablet testing, like an iPad type of thing. And you're doing all these games, all these memory things, recalling words, numbers, things like that. And it takes a very long time to undergo these tests. So what I learned was that I was well enough to undergo the treatment, but I had some significant cognitive impairment on things like word recall, memory, numbers, things like that. So they were able to demonstrate sort of where my weaknesses were. When I went through the treatment and played those brain training games, the idea is this is going to improve my cognitive, function. So 3 weeks after treatment, I went back and I took the same test, and they showed me vast improvements in my cognitive functioning in every area. They gave me a percentage improvement in each area as well. I also saw improvement because of the jogging. I saw improvements in my physical testing, including my VO2 max score and things like that, what I was able to accomplish. What I found most incredible was 6 months later. Now, at this point, I stopped doing the brain training games. You're still eligible to do them, but I just didn't have that kind of tablet, and my phone is too small to play the game. So, but I got back to the normal brain exertion that I do, teaching, thinking, writing, speaking, publishing, things like that. And that requires a lot of organization and a lot of brain training type stuff or brain use. So when I underwent my testing at 6 months, I couldn't believe that my cognitive functioning improved even more. So they were able to show steady cognitive improvements from through the treatment to the end of the treatment to 6 months later as a result. And since I continued to jog when I got home, that's another gift they gave me, was that new hobby that I have. I think I've done about 180 jogs total now. I keep track of it since I started treatment last year, and I continue to see the physical improvements as well.
That's wonderful, and that's improvement 6 months after speaks to exactly what you're saying, which is the healing keeps going. Um,
Right.
so it's great you saw all those objective improvements. And I'm curious, obviously you've recovered, which is wonderful, but did you get any benefits that even besides from recovering from long COVID and ME-CFS that, actually make your life better even than before you became sick in the first place?
It's interesting. I don't know how relevant this is, but my testosterone levels increased.
Well,
Don't know what that's about, but that's
yeah.
beneficial.
Well, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
So,
But
yeah,
other than that, it's just quality of life. It's the peace of knowing that that part of my suffering is over. The hope that this continues going forward. The other benefit is the possibility of helping others find satisfactory treatments, even a cure for them. It's really nice to be able to contribute to that idea as well.
yes, I really appreciate you sharing your story, Mathhew. As we were saying before were recording, reading your book was very helpful in my own decision to try hyperbaric oxygen. And
Yeah,
I've got high hopes that it's going to help me. I'm not having the
yeah,
kind of initial dramatic response that you did, but I am seeing subtle improvements.
good.
And I read your story on Health Rising as well.
Mhm.
And what I think is an interesting question I wanted to ask you is a lot of people with ME have sensory sensitivities like
Yes,
light, noise, and smell.
yeah.
And oftentimes people use brain retraining, neuroplasticity, and they can improve those things. What I'm curious about is, did you have those things, and did the hyperbaric oxygen alone help you with them?
Great question. Yes, I did have those things, in particular, sensitivity to light and noise. So, in those times where I was bedbound and I was stationary, I tried to avoid significant lighting and sound. This is obviously difficult for a spouse to deal with because I would have to say you're, being too loud or whatever, things like that, very respectfully. But it made it difficult to, when you're in bed, there's only so much you can do. And when you're as sick as I was, and as you have been, and others as well, it's difficult to read, at least for an extensive period of time. I had very great difficulty with screen time. Being on a computer or a phone really set me off. And so it made it hard to watch shows and movies, but that's what I wanted to do. So I started listening to books on Audible and things like that, that didn't require visual attention and things like that. But those things did improve through the HBOT treatments, the hyperbaric oxygen. The brain fog completely went away. I haven't had an issue with that since I was treated, and that's really wonderful to be back in the classroom and not losing my train of thought and not being able to find words and things like that. So all of that improved as well.
That's wonderful to hear. And what you're saying there reminds me of something that Dr. Shai Efrati said, who's um, uh, does the equivalent of the Aviv Clinics in Tel Aviv. He talks about how PTSD is actually caused by damaged brain tissue. And I sometimes think that this sensitized brain that's going on in ME-CFS, it could involve damaged brain tissue. And so I wonder if the improvement of your sensitivities speaks to the way in which it managed to actually rebuild the brain for you in those areas.
Yeah, and so again, I alluded to this just a bit ago, but I didn't really specify much. That they do a SPECT scan of your brain, which allows you get a color-coded picture of your brain that shows where there's a lack of oxygen to your brain. And for me, I had these two lines in my frontal lobes, my prefrontal cortex, that suggested, significant brain damage or lack of blood flow, whatever you want to call it. I saw this throughout my brain, but most notably the frontal portion of your brain, which is so vital to executive function. And after my treatment, when I got the same SPECT scan, those lines were gone. So apparently that brain damage was repaired by the HBOT treatment.
Wow, that is amazing and very encouraging. And for me, that's what ME-CFS like feels like at a brain level, is that the executive function is shot. It's
That's right.
just gone
Yeah.
wild. Yeah, yeah. So that's very good, very, very encouraging and inspiring for people. And I just want to say to those watching right now that, if you're, for example, based in the UK, there are charities that do hyperbaric oxygen, and they only charge £20 a session. And so there's a range of options that, because it might not be accessible for everyone to do this treatment, but I just want to say that there are clinics in other countries. I've come to Romania. In the UK and Ireland, there are charities which do this. So not to feel put off. This is something that it is possible for people to follow. Um, Now, did you come off those three medications in the end? And how did that go if you did?
So I did come off of them, and what I noticed was a slight return of my symptoms. And so I contacted the team at Aviv, and I contacted my doctor at Bateman Horn, and they advised me that these medicines are so, I don't know, minor, whatever you want to call it, that I've never had side effects from them or anything like that. So they suggested I get back on them. And so I did. And so I don't know if I need them, but for me, it's a sort of peace of mind to be on them. So I maintain those three medicines even now. And I guess I'm afraid to get off of them.
Yeah. Well, that's very understandable. I mean, the main thing is you have now got back a really full life. You're able to
That's
do
right.
5Ks. You've done 4 5Ks, I think, since you finished, or maybe more at this stage. You're back
No,
to.
I was doing 4 or 5 Ks a week. Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, sorry. Right. Yeah. Okay. Four, five
Yeah,
Ks.
yeah.
Well,
Now I'm down to about two a week, but I'm still doing them.
oh
Yes.
yeah, just the two. Yeah, grand. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So you're doing that. You have a full life. You're traveling again. You've gone to South
Yeah.
Africa. I mean, it's you have your life back.
Yeah.
And so to take three medications that, as Bateman Horn say, are minor in the grand scheme of things,
Yeah.
you know, so what really? So,
Yeah. Yeah.
so basically, that's wonderful, Mathhew. That your story is very, very inspiring. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
that you shared it with us today. We can sort of maybe move more now towards wrapping things up. I know that you're a poet,
Yes.
and you filled your book with a lot of poetry that marked different stages of your journey. And
Yeah.
I asked you to pick out a poem that maybe you'd like to share with us that kind of represents your journey. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to read us that poem, and then to finish with any final thoughts or final message that you have for people watching.
Thank you so much for that opportunity. I really appreciate it. So you mentioned my book. This is the book, and I have one of the poems that I selected is from page 80 of the book. It's called Will, and I wanted something more inspiring because the book is filled with such dreadful poetry about what it was like to be sick. I thought the poems best captured my suffering more than I could even put in words, other than poetry. So I chose this one as a little bit more, and this was during treatment at Aviv. So I'll read it now. It's called Will. In shadows deep, where hope seemed frail, I waged a battle on a weary trail. Through endless nights and daunting days, I maintained courage amidst the haze. A chronic foe, relentless and strong. Still within my heart, a whispered song. A melody of resilience, true and pure. Kept taking steps, each one secure. Through trembling hands and weakened frame, fires of fortitude still aflame. Hurdles faced and setbacks met. On myself, I made a bet. Through valleys low with sights set high, my spirit soared, refusing to die. For in the depths of darkest strife lies the spark of a resilient life. Here I stand, my scars worn proud. From fighting long, I say out loud, no matter what, my will won't bend. I will overcome, and this will end.
That is a very moving poem, Mathhew. Thank you very much for sharing that. It
Thank you
speaks
so much.
very much to me. And I think for everyone here, now listening to that, it speaks to the fact that all ME-CFS patients watching this have incredibly strong spirits, much stronger than what this illness can do to them.
Yeah.
And that you never know what can happen if you keep backing yourself, keep trying to look for improvement, because our bodies do actually want to get better.
Yes, very good point.
So thank you very much, Mathhew. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. And I wish you all the best with the rest of your life free from these conditions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I look forward to reading your book. I look forward to staying in touch with you. And I appreciate everything you're doing to help people improve in their lives. It's such important work.
Thank you very much, Mathhew. That's kind of you.